Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 21 Hats podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Feldman. This week, starting with a conversation about crucial hires Dana White and Laura Zander have made recently, a salesperson for Laura and operations manager for Dana, we found ourselves exploring some of the great unresolved debates of entrepreneurship. Which comes first when hiring, filling specific needs or finding places for good people? With salespeople, do you motivate by paying commission or do you build a team by paying salary? And in finance, do you bootstrap to maintain control or raise capital to grow faster? Obviously, there's no one right answer to any of these questions, but Dana and Laura tell us what's been working for them. Even in good times, owning and running a business can be a lonely pursuit. Our hope is that these weekly conversations will, if nothing else, let owners know they are not alone in facing these challenges. Same thing with the 21 Hats Morning Report, which you can subscribe to at 21hats.com. This week's 21 Hats podcast lineup features Laura Zander, who is CEO of Jimmy Bean's Wool, a digital version of a neighborhood yarn shop that's based in Reno, Nevada, and also has a wholesale supplier, Madeline Tosh, in Fort Worth, Texas, and Dana White, who is CEO of Paralee Boyd, a chain of hair salons based in Detroit. This episode is titled, We'll Find Something for Them to Do. Laura, the last time you were on, we were talking about your real estate issues and the building that you tried to buy that didn't go through. But along the way, you mentioned that you'd hired a salesperson who was having quite a bit of success, it sounded like. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What led to the hiring and how is it going?
Sure. It's a lot more serendipitous than it sounds, not quite as intentional. But I had a sales rep that would visit me all the time, a guy that I had become friends with, and, we would talk kind of outside of work. And he was working for a company. I'm sorry,
this is a sales rep that was trying to sell you something?
Yes. So he worked for so at Jimmy Bean's, he worked for one of the yarn companies that we bought from, a company that was out of New York. And he worked for them for, I think, 7 years. And so he would come and visit our shop, twice a year. And then, whenever we had issues, we could talk with him, blah, blah, blah. And he was a great salesman, really, really good, really knowledgeable, really understood the product, blah, did a great job and was a real hustler. And he and I happened to be, I'll call it like self-improvement buddies. So over the last 10 years now, we're always like, ooh, what's the latest? He just bought me a book called, How to Think Like a Monk. So we're always kind of comparing notes and, on this journey of constant, never-ending self-improvement together. So he left the yarn company a couple of years ago, maybe 2 years ago, and decided he went into real estate and didn't like real estate. So then he went and worked for a corporate company and just was miserable and didn't like it. And he missed traveling. So at the same time, I had been talking to him for about a year because we had purchased that company Namaste, which is now Delacue, and we are making handbags and had been thinking about how to expand our reach with that. And had talked with him kind of loosely, casually about, hey, maybe you could go to Australia for us and take our bags and see if you could sell them to some different yarn shops. But it never financially made sense. The market wasn't big enough to support the cost of sending him to Australia or sending him to Canada, and then the hotels and, all the expenses that go along with it. We didn't think we could get enough revenue to make it worth it. Anyway, so when we bought this Madeline Tosh company, this yarn company, which is a multi-million-dollar business, I was talking to him in January. And we, again, serendipity. He needed a full-time job for his own personal, financial reasons, as opposed to being just a sales rep, which is usually a strictly commission job. The reps in our industry get anywhere from 8 to 12% on all sales. So he needed a full-time job, and we couldn't really. So we just decided, what? Why don't we do this? Why don't we try it? Why don't we hire you as an employee and then we'll pay your expenses and you can drive around the country and sell our yarn and our bags now to different shops. And it could be a win-win where he gets to go travel all the time. We actually bought him a tent that goes on top of his Subaru, on top of his car. So
you make your salesperson live in a tent?
Wow.
No, he wanted it. He was so excited. He's like, and I mean, what a great win-win. So it took, these tents are expensive. It was a couple $1,000, but it takes 15 nights of him staying in the tent as opposed to the hotel to pay for the tent. And now he's got a tent that he can go camping with, whenever he wants. And he's like me, he sleeps in the car sometimes. Before we got the tent, he would just sleep in the car.
I don't know. Do you want a salesperson sleeping in the car before they call on an account?
I trust him and I trust his judgment that he's not just going to sleep in the car right before he goes, to an account, that maybe he does that 2 nights before and then he stays somewhere where he can take a shower. But the point is that he is fully, just fully committed and invested in we got to cut costs and we're trying to figure out how to build up inventory. And, he's not going out to super fancy dinners. So he's a real team player. He's really, I don't know, he's given it his all and he's accounting for probably 50% of our revenue right now.
Wow.
Whoa.
Oh yeah. It's ridiculous.
What had you been doing before? Had you ever had a salesperson like this?
No. So the Tosh business, this yarn business in Texas, they had a group of sales reps. So I think 6 of them. And those reps would go from store to store. They were paid strictly on commission, but they also had other accounts and other companies that they repped for. So while they contributed a fair amount, this wasn't their full-time job and this wasn't the only company that they were repping. So we thought that by having one full-time guy who was 100% devoted to us, that we could make a big difference that way.
So before buying Madeline Tosh, you'd never really had the need to have a full-time person like this.
Correct.
I know a lot of business owners struggle with hiring that first salesperson. Their concerns about whether they know what they're selling as well as the owner does. There's also the issue of, how you pay somebody. Do you do it on salary or commission? Were you concerned about any of those issues?
A little bit. I wasn't concerned about him knowing the brand and knowing the line as well as I did or as well as any of us did, because this is what he does. I mean, he's really good at knowing it and learning it. So he knows the product way better than I do. Granted, I've only been there a year, so it's not like I was the founder of the company.
Right.
So I'm sure he doesn't know it as well as the founder. That said, this is what he does, and this is what he's good at. In terms of kind of the pay structure, that's where I'd like to say that this was super intentional. And I guess at some level it was because, we talked about the different ways that we could approach it. Do we just do a commission thing? Do we do a salary plus commission? But, when it came right down to it, we just ended up in a very unique situation where we came up with a win-win, a win-win scenario for both of us. And we both had to give a little and we both had to trust a little.
How are you paying him? Is it what percentage is it salary? What percentage commission?
No commission, just full salary. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I've had a lot of great conversations through the years, a lot of very smart business owners who have told me that they think it's a great idea not to pay commission, that you want employees to feel like that they're on the team and part of the organization and not just lone wolves out there for themselves. But then when I raise this with other business owners, they think that idea is completely insane. How did you decide to just do salary?
Again, this was very situational. He needed the constant income. And so we gave him, a salary that would be the equivalent of what he would make in commission if he were to sell X number of dollars for the year. Which is where we feel comfortable. But we knew, and he knew, that he wouldn't be able to sell that amount for at least a year or 18 months because, they don't get commission until the customer actually pays. And the way our industry works and the way our business works is he could put an order in, but the customer's not going to receive the product for 4 months. So then he's not going to get his commission for 4 months. And he wasn't in a position personally to be able to wait for those 4 months. So again, what we just decided is, look, we'll pay you this salary. And then, once you surpass that amount of sales that, once you start to exceed that, then maybe we can talk about bonuses. We can talk about whatever, but that's not going to be for a year or a year and a half. That said, in our kind of loosey-goosey arrangement where we're at is we bought him a tent, a couple $1,000 tent for his thing. We're being really flexible. We're like, okay, what part of the world do you want to go visit once things open up, of course?
Does he know that he's accounting for 50% of your sales?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and he comes to Texas and everybody like hugs him. And, the whole team is so grateful because he's providing jobs for so many people.
I'm not sure you're supposed to be doing that right now.
Yeah. What do you mean?
The hugging.
No. Okay. They're not actually hugging him, but they're virtually. Great point. Okay. Yes. No, they're not actually hugging him. But they're all like, thank you. Gracias. Anyway, so, I think part of the give and take is, hey, how does Australia sound? Does that sound fun? Or do you want to go to New Zealand? Or
has this been an international business before? Is that what you bought? Or is that something that you're initiating?
It has some international sales, but it could grow 500% easily. Nobody's, they haven't done a lot of work to encourage the international sales. So like, as soon as Canada opens up, he'll go to Canada. So we're doing that. And then like his dream in life is to have a van, a Sprinter van that's got the bed in it and, and all that stuff. So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at buying him a Sprinter van. And then he can drive that around instead of using his own car. And then he can sleep in that instead of sleeping in a hotel most of the time. It'll have its own shower.
I was going to ask. I think the shower might be key.
Yeah. Then he can take yarn with him and sell yarn like cash and carry. And, so we're just being really flexible with each other. And, okay, here's a van that could potentially cost $100,000. How do we make that make sense from a financial standpoint, but then also give him a really cool lifestyle? So again, like I said, it's kind of a unique situation.
Yeah, it is, because you had the person first. It's not like you decided you needed to hire someone and then searched the world for exactly the right person. Do you think you've learned anything doing this? I mean, has it changed your thinking about how you want to sell going forward? Would you hire more salespeople?
It has changed the way we've thought about things a lot, actually. And what Adam and Adam is the salesman, he's really trying to get involved, with the development side of the business as well, not just the sales part. But, we talk a lot about, do we need sales reps? We love our sales reps and we're not going to let them go. But at some point, like when one of them drops off or one of them, is going to do something else, do we need to replace them? Or could we have Adam literally just go to all 50 states and drive around, and then we build an inside sales team just to support him and do follow up that way? Do we have more, like you said, more people on salary and less people on commission? And we're just kind of exploring it and testing it out. But you're right about the fact that we had the person first. And I mentioned that because that's how we've approached a lot of the business is, people are like, let's go hire for blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, I don't want to hire for them. I want the person to come to us. I like the woman that we just hired from Denver, we just hired 2 people from Denver, and they came to us and we found positions for them. We created positions for them. We weren't really looking for them, but when somebody good shows up, then we figure it out. And then what has happened historically is then the business grows to support them as a result of having them. So maybe we end up kind of hiring a little earlier than we would have because we're constantly keeping our eyes open for good people.
Interesting.
Do you know what I mean? Like we haven't had to get to a point where we're like, we need a salesman, because we ended up filling that position before we realized we needed it.
So, Dana, you have told us in recent conversations about a big hire as well. You hired an operations manager that you were very excited about last time we spoke. How's that working out?
It's working out really well. It's working out really fast. She hit the ground running, and it's going really, really, really fast. She's excited about the work that she's doing. She's excited about the business, and I've been happy to have the conversation with her. What are you seeing? My view is very different. I'm the owner, and sometimes to me, all I see is doom and gloom, right? But then you've got somebody who, was the director of operations for a national chain, was a general manager,
a national chain of hair salons.
Yes, national chain of hair salons, and so their perspective is very valuable. She's been with me over a month now, and we talk all the time, but her assessment on Paralee Boyd was, wow, this is a plug and play business. The manager that she hired in, who's also, has experience managing several salons, I've never seen anything like this. And again, I've set up, a relationship with them, even though it's short. I'm not into flattery. If don't butter me up. That's the worst thing to do because I see right through it. And I like the fact that their personalities aren't that way anyway. They are, straight shooters. So listening to their feedback on what they think with their vast experience about what Paralee Boyd is, and they still stand true with the fact that there was nothing wrong with your business. You just needed good leadership. And you need volume.
And good people. I think the last time you were on, you talked about shutting down the business for maybe a week or two to staff up. You had been struggling to keep people working. And I think she was leading that process of staffing up. How did that go?
It went amazing. Fully staffed.
Wow.
We have one more position, but we decided to add that after. So our goal for reopening was met and exceeded with a wait list of stylists.
What did she do different? Why was she able to get you staffed up like that so quickly?
She hired for the person, not for the position. Because she said, your systems and processes are strong enough, we can train anybody as long as they have a license and have a good foundation. She said, we'll train anybody. And she said, that's what I mean. Your business isn't as bad as, I thought it was. She said, please, I walked in here on the day of my interview, and my job is to look at what's going on that the owner isn't talking about. So missing light bulbs and anything that was a concern. We didn't have retail on the shelves, but you had a plan for that, but you needed leadership to help you execute. So all I saw from day one, interview one, she said, was you need leadership. And I came in, and now look at your business. So our numbers have gone up. We had a couple of slow days, but she's really, really eager. I think Jay or Paul brought up a good point in a previous episode about having a leader that's used to in a corporate environment where things move very quickly. Things move quickly at Paralee Boyd because there's not a lot of layers, but I have a social media person who has our calendar planned out for what the posts are going to be. So sometimes I'll get a text message, Dana, we should post about this today. And it goes, oh, okay. I don't think she realizes how deliberate our branding is. They even created a site for us to hire on Facebook, a Facebook page. And I said, oh, take that down. It was not branded at all. It didn't have our logo, wasn't our colors. And it was another Paralee Boyd Facebook page. So they were very anxious. But I said, guys, similarly to a corporate environment, that has to be approved and that has to be designed so it fits the brand. And that was just the manager who was used to running smaller salons. It didn't come from my operations manager who knew that. So they're working very quickly, and I think they're very excited. But we met and exceeded our hiring goals to the point where we have wait list, about 3 or 4 stylists. We also were able to start a earn to learn program, because the problem in Michigan is you have young ladies and men who want to be cosmetologists and get their license, but the time requirement doesn't allow them to work as well and support their children or their families. Well, Ashley has started an earn to learn program where you can get your basic amount of hours for cosmetology school while working at Pearlie Boyd. And then because she's an instructor, she can transfer the hours to finish your cosmetology license at a full school if you choose. So they can just work here, make money, get their hours. We'll train them, and then they can decide if they want to complete at a cosmetology school. We have 2 people already in the program. And that's it. It's working out really, really well. I just have to, what's the word or the phrase? I guess get ready and make sure I'm the leader ready for this type of employee.
Are you having trouble letting go at all?
Not at all.
And I guess I guess I struggle a little bit with the phrase letting go, because I'm like, I don't have any problem letting go. I have problem letting go, I guess, if somebody doesn't know what they're doing, you know. Yeah. But if I find somebody that I trust, or, you know, they are competent, blah, blah, blah. But okay, so are you having any control issues? Like,
not
are
at
you
all.
Noticing? You're not?
No, my issue, because I did a lot of work on the front end, and I was very, clear about what I wanted and how I wanted it done. The only time I'll take back that control is if I walk in my salon and see something else. What I think we're going through right now is the establishment of trust and the understanding that, yes, I understand that you have, umpteen many years in salon experience, but this is a different salon. And I think she gets that it's a different salon. So she defers to Dana. So, this is different. I know it would have worked at Great Clips or Lady Jane's, but let me make sure it works here.
Dana in the third person. Do you refer to yourself in the third person when you talk to her?
No, I was saying her. I was saying who says that. I don't say that. But she defers to Dana because she's like, let me make sure that
got it.
Here.
Yeah.
This is what she said, this is a very precise business. She says, I've never seen anything like it. And it wasn't until we were busy one day and she looked and says, oh my goodness, it's a machine. She just kind of stood there and watched everything just kind of fall into place. So, and it made her role clearer as to what she needs to do to make sure that everything just keeps running like a machine.
I love that she's hiring for people, not for position. I think that's, you just articulated what I was trying to say, is that that's been our approach the whole time. I think just intuitively, and man, some people do not like it. Like they get really frustrated internally because they're like, this is exactly the skill set that we need. I'm like, we're not a factory, we're looking for people. And if we find somebody who fits like that skill set 50%, but they have 50% of other skills that we didn't even know we were looking for, and they're a good fit for the business, then we'll figure it out. Like that's the beauty of being flexible.
Culture. She basically hired based on who I am and what I need.
Is she literally hiring people who have no experience doing this? No.
So cosmetology, you have to have a license or so many hours. So it's not, like retail, okay, you're running the cash register or you're managing the floor for putting apparel out. No, we have an industry standard and she meets that. But what we were doing differently in the past were checking the boxes and hiring people who were out for self, hiring people who didn't quite grasp the vision and what we're trying to do, couldn't quite let go of the fact that this is not a traditional salon and we're trying to perform traditionally in this salon. So they weren't making it. What I think and what I believe I've seen her do, she's hiring for, do you understand who we are and what we're doing? If you can grasp that, how this salon is different.
What is it that they don't grasp generally? What do they not understand about your salons?
They wanted to be walking only 7 days a week, but I want to take my time. I want to talk. I want to promote myself. I want to have my cell phone on the floor. I want to talk to this person in my chair as if they're my customer versus Pearlie Boyd's customer. So we had an example of a young lady who came in and she didn't realize who she was talking to. You have no idea that that's the chief of staff for such and such, but you're just running your mouth. Right? Because in your mind, this is a traditional salon and this is my customer. No, this isn't your customer. This is a customer of Pearlie Boyd. We had another customer who felt that he was giving a client a compliment because her hair looked nice. And he said, you know what? You're going to make a baby tonight. And she burst out in tears. And she said, I really hope so. Not realizing that her and her husband have been trying for a very long time. You don't know who's in your chair. So she hired people who would have no problem carrying out the customer service level and the mindfulness level of Paralee Boyd. And she said, these people came to us. These people started following us on Instagram. These are people who sent their resume, not necessarily through Indeed, but was referred to us, who wanted to, a change. So they kind of already knew that they wanted something different. And I said, well, what was that something different for them? And I'll tell you guys, seriously, they wanted to work in a salon owned by a Black woman or a Black person.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Dana, because one of the things I wanted to ask you is you've expressed concern that in the past, when you had even a white receptionist, that some of your customers wondered if the salon was still Black owned. I believe your operations manager, you told us, is white. I'm wondering if the same issue has come up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've had people text me, do you still own it? I've had people lean over and whisper to me, you still own Paralee Boyd, right? I say, yeah, why? Girl, we saw 2 white girls in there. I said, so why don't you think I own it? And then they get caught. And so what I guess annoys me even more is, how impressed they are. The fact that I could have 2 white people working for me. Now they're super impressed and they respond to the business differently. But they're not surprised when it's the inverse. When you see 2 Black people working in an all white business, you don't think that the business is Black owned. It's just one of those obvious things.
I know it's not the same thing, but in a similar vein, that's what I experienced for the first probably 10 years because of my age. Mm-hmm. So all the women that worked for us were 20 years older than me. And so, people would come in and they'd say, can I talk to the owner? And, or whatever. They just always assumed I was a high school help and, would go to the other woman that was working there and just assumed. So again, I know it's different, but it is similar in some ways, what the preconceived notions are. And then when they find out it's me, they're like, whoa. I mean, and actually that still kind of happens when I go to trade shows and stuff. They're like, wow, I was expecting this old white guy. Yeah. Named James.
I get that too. I get age, color, and marriage actually. Cause they'll look down at my hand and see there's no ring. I've gotten that before.
Oh, weird.
And so, and then it's funny because I'm standing next to Tehran, they defer to him as the owner. And he said, I'm here to change a light bulb. You might want to talk to her. It's like, it's not me, it's her, and so it's a couple of different things, but with my team, that has definitely been, especially over the first couple of weeks, that's been, is this still on? Even though there's a gigantic picture of me that you can see from across the street, they still wonder if I'm the owner.
So what do you say to your team about that? Like, how do you address that with your team?
I don't really. I kind of laugh about it with them. Both of my manager and my operations manager have told me you have one of the most loyal customer bases they've ever seen. They want you to do well. They're just waiting for you to just take off. They want you to do well. So, and communication with them is key, but communication by phone. My guests are not email people. For some reason, they're not website people. They're not social media people. So they have been making a lot of phone calls, calling people and talking to them, checking in with them.
So, Dana, you've told us 2 things. You've told us some of your customers are concerned that you might not be Black owned anymore, but you've also told us that some of your customers are impressed that you have white employees. Is this a net positive for the business or a problem that you think you have to deal with?
I think it's a net positive. And I don't think they're 2 different categories. They're both. The first response is this Black owned? Yes, it is. They work for me. Oh,
interesting.
Net positive for the business.
So the other thread that we've been talking to you about, Dana, is you're winning Detroit Demo Day and a $200,000 infusion that you have to decide whether you want to take as a loan or as a convertible note, and you have to decide how you're going to spend it, and also the possibility that could lead to other investors taking interest in what you're doing. Where does all that stand?
I have a VC that is interested. Actually, I've had a few approach me since winning. I have a VC that I've spoken with that I'm actually very interested in working with. And so I haven't touched the money yet. I have a call with the team next week to talk about new developments. And this new development is, the next step in pursuing VC dollars. So we that's where we are. After I had this initial conversation, it was, hey, don't spend your money. Hold on. And so, okay, let's hang on. I've done my vetting, you talk to people that know who these people are, what they're about, and everything's been glowing and positive.
Have you talked to other entrepreneurs that this VC firm has invested in?
No, I've talked to other entrepreneurs who are in the VC world that know who they are. It's I don't want to say it's a club, but it's, hey, who will take you on? And most of the people that I've talked to who are in this VC world really are interested in this company, in this firm taking them on. And they've gone on to tell me why. So they just have a really great reputation for taking care of the businesses that they work with. They are definitely not a traditional VC. And that was part of the conversation. If you're going to work with Paralee Boyd, similarly to a tech startup where you're expecting, so much of a return in a year, this is not the company for you. And they agreed. They said, no, we're of the same mindset.
It sounds like you're clear in your mind that you are willing to sell some equity to bring in venture capital. We've all heard, horror stories about that. Are you sure this is something you want to do?
It is, because it's not VC in general. It's the unicorn VC. And we've talked about that before, to make sure that it's
unicorn, meaning not that they're looking to invest in unicorns that grow really quickly, but unicorn meaning they're a different kind of venture capital firm.
Exactly. Similarly to, Laura hiring and myself hiring, or even taking on a VC, it's all about fit. Who works? Who doesn't? The end game might be great, but if it's not the right fit, it's going to be ugly in the end. For me, you have to, in trying to figure out, one, is VC the way to go? I believe so. You have to reverse engineer your vision and say, okay, what's the best way you feel you could get there? And then I did that and say, I think VC is the way to go. But you want to make sure you want people who don't want you to have 10% ownership, because then it just, through the next series of rounds, it doesn't look good if Dana only owns 10%. So, working with people who understand that Dana needs to have a sizable investment is important. And not every VC firm is like that. Some VC firms are, we want, half up front. You're like, whoa, you want 51% of my company for how much? Right.
I'm curious what Laura thinks. You have any thoughts?
No, I'm just excited to watch how this all plays out and, talk to Dana in 2 years and see what the experience was like. I think, you have such a different model and experience than we do, because you want to open other locations. So in my mind, you do need a lot of capital, right? And you need somebody who can help make that happen. That's a totally different situation than we're in. So it's exciting. And what great validation.
I'm a little nervous because, we've all heard the horror stories. And I'm just like Miss Seeley in The Color Purple. I'm just waiting to see what color the wall's going to turn next.
Dana, the other thing that's interesting about it is we've all read countless stories in recent years about how it's almost impossible for women to get venture capital. The percentage is tiny. It's even harder, almost impossible for minorities to get venture capital. And it's really hard for non-tech companies to get venture capital. So you got a trifecta here.
I know. How
do you explain that?
I think it's the VC firm and what they're looking for. I don't think they're looking for tech companies. This is a company based, in the Midwest. They're heavily involved in the Midwest. They're not in Silicon Valley or Silicon Alley. They're looking for businesses like mine. They're looking for minority women businesses to take on that are or aren't in tech. So, and you look at their, portfolio, especially of the list of, I have about 5 to 6 potential VCs that I'm like, they seem like they would be a fit. And they all have a business development component. They all come with a vast network, literally a phone call away to help get you what you need to grow. They're very invested in making sure you grow, not so much for the short return, but again, they want to set you up to succeed so they can get bought out and you can move forward. So yeah, it's kind of a weird trifecta, but I think COVID brought that on too. I think COVID required VCs and, all these other companies to look at what are viable companies differently when thrown, something like an international pandemic. Some of the ones you thought were going to just skyrocket and take off didn't. They closed. So that I think businesses or VCs or people who are investing are looking at companies a little differently based on the new information from the pandemic and what we've learned about the resilience of companies.
We're almost out of time. I'm not sure this question makes sense for you, Dana, but I'd like to ask Laura the question that I asked William, Jay, and Paul last week, which is about what this year has done to all of you in some sense and to your businesses. I'm curious, one, do you think your business is worth more or less today than it was when this year began back in January? And I'd also like to ask you, if somebody were to come along and offer you twice what you think the business is worth, would you consider selling it now?
Great question. Do I think the business is worth more or less than it was?
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess it's probably worth more. But a big part of that is because we bought a company that was about to go bankrupt.
And turned it around.
Yeah. And we've turned it around. So our revenue has grown 50%, or 80% or something this year, versus last year. But that's because we bought another company. It's, we're not comparing apples to apples. If
you hadn't bought the company, Jimmy Bean's Wool still would have probably had a pretty good year, right? People have been knitting.
Yes. Yep. Knitting. We're really lucky that we're in an industry that has really benefited from people staying at home and needing something to do to reduce stress. So, yeah. So we've had a good year. Would I walk away if somebody offered twice what it's worth today? Probably not, only because in the next 3 years, we're going to be worth twice as much. This year is still a year of huge investment. We got a new facility that's going to be custom built. We've invested, we've tripled our inventory and on the Texas side of things. We've invested in a new computer system, blah, blah, blah. So it's not worth as much as it might be.
Was that a deliberate decision to triple inventory?
Yes. So when we bought it, there was almost zero inventory.
Oh, I see.
There was literally zero inventory. So we've had to go in and...
So it's 3 times nothing.
There was some, but it wasn't even the right inventory. That's a great question. I guess who wouldn't walk away or, who wouldn't take an offer that's 2 times, if somebody offers you 2 times for your house, of course you would move, wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you?
Well, it depends on your situation. And you just gave us a good reason not to, because you think it's going to be worth even more soon. And that's kind of the answer that William gave us. Paul said the same thing you just said. Why wouldn't I do that?
Yeah. For me, it's really fun, so I enjoy, this has been the most stressful year.
And that's what Jay said. Jay is further along than any of you.
Yeah, he's old.
We'll find out if he's listening.
Yeah, exactly.
But he likes going to work and he doesn't have any hobbies and he doesn't want to move to Florida. So he's not, but if somebody offered him 3 times, I think he would really start thinking about it.
Sure.
I'm 8 years in. So this month will be 8 years for Purely Boyd. My answer is absolutely not.
Well, you're at a point where exciting things are happening. It really wouldn't make sense for you to walk away at this point.
I love the possibility of the vision way too much. Offer me 4 or 5 times. That means that it'll probably do 10 times. You're offering me double. You probably know it's double that. So no, I want to see what the end of the story looks like. And I want to be, I don't necessarily need to be in the front seat, but I definitely want to be in the cockpit when I see what happens. So for me, and I think the value of my company has definitely increased this year. And I'm so surprised by it. Our numbers, it's hard to say because I closed a location. So in our Midtown location, numbers have gone up because we don't have the Southfield location, but we're there. So, we'll see. I think we're much better situated now than we were last year.
Last question. I hate to do this, but we are having this conversation at a time when COVID cases are just exploding across the country. I'm curious how concerned both of you are by that and what impact you think it might have on your businesses. Dana?
I'm very concerned, but do what we have to do to keep my staff and my customers safe. So we need to close down. I hope we have a plan in place. I know I've got my product line will be here by Black Friday, so there'll be things that people can buy online. But we're just trying to see, if we have to close down, we will keep the staff safe. But I just hope the government is prepared to help small businesses like they were before.
Laura, you were going to open your one brick and mortar retail location last time we spoke. Did that actually happen?
It did. Yeah,
Ooh.
It's open. Just a little bit. I mean, we don't have a ton of traffic. So, I think we're just open on Saturday and Sundays. So just for a little while. But am I concerned? Mine, I think I'm with Dana. Many of us have grown accustomed to this as the new normal and the new way of life. So whatever needs to happen is what needs to happen for the greater good, and we'll just adapt on the back end. So I'm not concerned because I know we can adapt because we've had practice.
Dana White and Laura Zander, thank you as always. Thanks for listening, everybody. This episode was produced by Jess Thuberon, founder of Blank Word Productions. Remember, we started the 21 Hats podcast to help business owners feel a little less isolated, to let them know they aren't the only ones fighting these battles. If you got something out of this conversation, please help us reach more people. Tell a friend, subscribe and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Twitter at 21_hats. And let me know if you have a question or a comment or a topic you'd like us to cover. My email address is lfeldman@21hats.com. See you next time.